It was a mess. I mean, it was everything laying all over, you know.
There was a helplessness about it. The church is gone.
In 1831, in Tiffin, churches were just starting to get started. And the first of those churches was St. Mary's. By 1845, there was a movement among a number of denominations who had a large population of German people. They wanted to have a congregation that did the services in their own language. And in 1845, Tiffin St. Joseph's Parish was formed. In 1861, just as the Civil War was getting underway, they built this.
The church at that point in time was extremely grand. It was extremely decorated. There was a lot of arched, curved sections that went up that were supported by not so much support pillars, but more by decorative pillars. And all these had stripings on them. All of them had tapestries with biblical scenes in them.
The original church had a spire that was actually 180 feet tall. So it was the centerpiece, the most visible, the most imposing building in downtown Tiffin.
People thought a lot of their church. The pews were always full in church, full.
The people gravitate to their church. That's their family. That's their home.
Fire of 1934 was very devastating, not only physically to the building, but also to the parish. People were really fearful that the church would not be able to be rebuilt.
A major storm had crossed through in a town, and somewhere around, to the best of everyone's guess, maybe 1:30 in the morning, a lightning strike had hit the steeple. And somewhere or another it caught something on fire and it smoldered.
Well, back then, Monsignor Hoken was the pastor. And you know who his best friends were? Those darn pigeons. And they think that's the reason when the lightning struck. Why, of course, there was a fire, but the pigeons had their nests up there, and that's what helped the fire go. It must have burnt 5-6 hours before anybody knew it.
The fire was well underway in the steeple. It was way up there where it was very difficult to reach. As much pouring of the water onto it, it was already had too much of a head start.
It did burn from the outside. It was all seemed like it was burned from the inside. You see the outside there, it was fire on the inside. It was quite a scene for a little kid.
Father Schmelzer, he was one of the assistant pastors. He went over and got the Blessed Sacrament out of the tabernacle and took all the valuable things as much as he could.
Through the efforts of some area bystanders and the priests, and they were basically doing an assembly line of carrying things away and putting them in the priest house. But again, they had the fire breathing down their backs. It was quite literally rolling across the top of the ceiling. So these people were risking their lives.
When I went up, they wouldn't let us get too close to the church. But I can remember they were carrying a statue, I think it was of the Blessed Virgin, over to what we called the old building, and I'll never forget that.
The fire continued on. The firemen were inside the back of the church, but the fire chief fortunately had realized that he was seeing some structural issues that he felt that they better evacuate the church, and he did so, pulled the firemen back, and with quite literally minutes after that happened, the bells that were way up in the steeple began crashing down. And everybody who was in that area, they said it was a horrific noise, the sound of the bells working their way down through the church and hitting the ground floor with all the other debris. When the steeple started to fall, people went running for their lives. It was so overwhelmingly tall that no one knew where it was going to go, how far out it was going to reach. So there was this large scream, people were fleeing the area.
I lived on Coast Street, and my brother was there, and I don't know how we heard, but I know we went up in our attic and opened the front window, and we couldn't see the steeple, so we knew it was gone.
They fell across the Millmore and Coast Street and was laying over towards Deringer's gas station, Deringer's, and it was an awful lot of tears. People crying. It was one of the family had died.
Just the four walls were standing, no roof. The roof was all down on top of the pews.
It was a mess. I mean, it was everything laying all over, you know. And my dad he came up every day with these horses and wagons, and they loaded it all up in there, and then took it out. He worked, I don't know how many days up there.
Everybody was trying to do everything they could. And I think the whole city of Tiffin helped them.
The next day after this happened, area churches were offering the use of their buildings for our services. Financial gifts were coming in immediately. The bishop had come down from Toledo and declared that it will be rebuilt.
It was deep in the Depression. There were a lot of people who were on relief, who had nothing, bare bones, poor.
The people of St. Joseph needed to have their church rebuilt. In 5 weeks, they collected $50,000. Now, in today's economy, $50,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but the entire project cost $200,000. So in a 5-week period, they collected a fourth of what they needed to completely rebuild the church. They were not giving excess money. They were giving what they needed to live on. That was how great their love and dedication was to the church.
Oh yeah, people in those days didn't have much of anything. You always thought of the church first.
This fundraiser and what it eventually raised crossed every religious boundary. Various churches, by name, donated money to help rebuild the church. The people of Tiffin, including way outside of the walls of this church, gathered together to rebuild this place.
You can't imagine how tragedy brings people together, and there was so much togetherness that these families all put our church back together, what we wanted.
The church was built, this grand church was built in the beginnings of a conflict of the Civil War, and then here we are rebuilding the church again in the conflict of a financial war. I mean, we couldn't have picked worse times sometimes to do these things, but it was a time that shows the grit of and the work ethic of our area.
A great sign of the dedication of people and the value that they placed upon the church building, that they wanted to do that. And we certainly are beneficiaries of that today, you know, that they had that care and concern, you know, to do that building.
The windows are the same. They saved the windows. And they did save the stations too. See, they were on the walls. And it's the same walls that are still there.
The marble and stone type statues were all removed and were basically just cleaned by a local a mason, I believe. We had a company in town called Scenic Studios, and they were able, the tapestries that form the Stations of the Cross were basically removed, and they were sooty, but they were salvageable, and they were restored over there at the Scenic Studios.
Those are nice kind of remnants to hang on to as part of the legacy of the parish.
When the Israelites returned from Babylon and saw their temple in ruins, that was their first priority. They dedicated themselves to rebuilding the temple. And that was the first priority of the St. Joseph parishioners at this time, to rebuild the church. That was their first priority.
We think the world and all of our church. Well, we're happy to just belong to it.
They've handed on the appreciation that God is important in our lives. And the significant building that was built here in Tiffin said, you know, we're here to stay. The church is very prominent in our community, hopefully not just as a building, but as a presence of Christ and the work that we're trying to do.